want to thank Creator for the elements, light, air, water, earth, because we're made of these elements, and let's pledge to keep those elements pure. I want to thank Creator for the ancestors, and for everything that has happened to bring us to this moment in time. And I want to thank Creator for all the knowledge that we're holding within us. And let's bring that knowledge, let's share that knowledge with future generations. Thank you. Thank you so much. And in particular, I want to thank and welcome in some ancestors who have contributed greatly to the Language of Spirit dialogue. You know, the Language of Spirit dialogue, Dan Moonhawk Alford was my mentor in Native America. I took a class, he's here right now with, or his TA is here right now. I took a class with Dan Moonhawk Alford in 1983 at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and Matthew Bronson, who's sitting right here, was his TA then. Matthew was all 25 years old at the time, and Moonhawk was only 35, but we already thought of him as an ancient wise man. Moonhawk was such a warm and welcoming person, and it was very easy to have a lifelong friendship with him. And he became involved in these Language of Spirit dialogues that were, he was invited by his mentor, Sagesh Youngblood Henderson, to go to the dialogue in 1992 that was organized by Leroy Little and David Pete and was held in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It was sponsored by the Fetzer Institute. And that dialogue, you know, Moonhawk already had like 20 years plus of relationships, warm, loving relationships with Native America. But that dialogue ratcheted things up to another level. And it was very obvious that those dialogues were extremely important to Moonhawk. They continued for 7 years until Seed sponsored the first dialogue in 1999. At the time I was living in Rio Rancho, I had a further view, but I was still looking at the Sandia Mountains. And Moonhawk was smoking his pipe, as he always did. And out of that pipe came the pipe dream, and he said, "Glenn, why don't we bring the dialogues to Albuquerque?" And then I had, just recently founded Seed 2 years prior, and so that seemed like a big leap, but I also knew right away, yes, we're gonna do this, and we'll look for a grant, a very, very small grant, $5,000 to do it, but even if we don't get that grant, we'll invite an audience in, and that will mirror a principle of quantum theory, that the observer affects the observed, but I don't really even think of it that way anymore. It's really more, the inner circle and the outer circle have merged to become one mind. And that, for those that have been coming for year after year, you know that that's happening more and more. I want to say a few remarks about dialogue. Dialogue has just been so important to me personally. I feel that the major thing it has done, it's allowed my thinking processes to slow down, which allows a deeper knowing to come through. I was raised in New York, and when I grew up, conversation was a ping pong match. You go back and forth, and like David Bohm said, it was a discussion, and the word discussion is related to percussion. It's something. It's a rhythm, but it's the word dialogue. If you look at the etymology of it, dia does not mean two, as people commonly think of it. Dia means through, and log, or the logos, is the word. So meaning flows through, and that's really what happens, and that's what dialogue is all about. We do at Seed a hybrid of Bohemian dialogue and native talking circle. So we're not doing Bohemian dialogue exclusively. We're not doing native talking circle exclusively. We're doing, it's now an 11-year experiment, so I don't know if it qualifies as an experiment anymore. We're doing a hybrid. So in Bohemian dialogue and in the hybrid dialogue that we're doing, we don't have an agenda. we don't have an expectation of a result. We don't expect people to form committees afterward and then, take action steps and decide what they're going to do. That's not the way it works. What happens on the very subtle plane is magic. It's not that things don't get done after the dialogue, they do. David P., who was in the 1992 dialogue, ended up writing the book Blackfoot Physics, based on his experience, and then founding a learning center in Patti, Italy. Sagesh, Youngblood Henderson, and Leroy ended up doing a lot of work on biodiversity and linguistic diversity together over at the Native Law Center in Saskatoon and all over. Things do happen, but they happen on the subtle level. In Bohemian dialogue, there's really no moderator, or the moderator's job is actually to work themselves out of a job. So the moderator may begin and get things going, but then, once the group understands how to do things, the moderator steps back and becomes invisible. And in Bohemian dialogue, there's an idea that the group will meet, it's not specified exactly, but we'll meet on a regular basis, perhaps once a month or once every two months, and meet for an extended period. Might meet for 6 years or something. And the idea is that eventually the tacit infrastructures that people are holding, their beliefs, assumptions, and worldview, kind of recedes as people get to know each other and they form one mind. And that's Bohemian dialogue. In a seed dialogue, what we're looking for is a little bit something different. One of the reasons we have a sweat lodge tonight, and whether you're able to participate in the sweat lodge or not, the energy of the sweat lodge is going to be here tomorrow. Those guys may be up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, but they're going to be dreaming, they're going to be carrying the power of that energy into the dialogues tomorrow. It's a purification. And even if you're not going to the sweat lodge, I encourage each and every one of you to do your own work in purifying and preparing for the dialogue. Just try to just put aside the way that you normally think about things and prepare with an open mind and open heart. One of the most important differences between Bohemian dialogue and native talking circle, or the hybrid that we use, is the moderator. And our moderator, we've been blessed, we've been really blessed to have Leroy Middlebear be our moderator every year for the last 11 years. This will be the 12th. Leroy I playfully call our Blackfoot Zen Master. And Leroy does something that is not at all implied in Bohemian dialogue. He asks a kickstart question. And that kickstart question is intended to be challenging to native and non-native people alike. For instance, he asked a question once, do you really, truly believe in a separation of church and state? And at the time, that year of the dialogue, Nora Basin was in the circle, the daughter of Gregory Basin, and she said, when she heard that question, do you really, truly believe in a separation? At that point, she said, no, I don't believe in any separation. Then he said, church and state. Okay. Leroy also asked these questions in a timely way, too. So he was asking that question during the Bush administration, when there was some concern over what was happening with the administration bringing a theocracy to government. Okay. There was another year right after the 2001 bombing that Leroy just asked a very simple question, what would you say to Osama bin Laden if you had a 10-minute coffee break to talk with him? And these questions serve a very important purpose because, something like the question of Osama bin Laden sets up, the shadow, and who are we going to talk to here? These are really good. But if that's ready, I'm going to use it. If not, I'm going to go on. One other difference between Bohemian dialogue and the hybrid that we use is that it's perfectly okay with what we're doing For as long as Spirit is moving through you, I think I'm playing tennis today. As long as Spirit is moving through you, you're free to speak as long as it's moving through. And sometimes in Bohemian dialogue, for instance, if you read a book by William Isaacs on dialogue, he'll say it's rude to speak for a long time. It's some kind of an imposition of ego. We don't really think that, because within native traditions, it's not rude. When you have the talking stick and Spirit is moving through you, you can speak as long as necessary. There's the differences between Bohemian dialogue and the hybrid. One of the other differences, there's a little bit more emphasis within Bohemian dialogue on the limitations of thought. Because Bohm worked with Krishnamurti very closely, and he was concerned about the limitations of thought. We are too, but we also are emphasizing thought is almost equated with spirit. Thought, spirit is something that moves through us, and also we're connecting with nature. Now, I think if you really look at David Bohm's work carefully, he'll agree with this very much so. There's perhaps only a subtle difference between what David Bohm was thinking and Leroy is thinking on this point. But it's really about having a dialogue with the whole cosmos. And if we have that, we've got our hybrid dialogue.